Are you ready to become a change maker? Our 48-week postgraduate program in public policy or the PGP may be just the thing for you. This hybrid program is designed to give you both the theoretical foundation and hands-on experience needed to excel in policy making. With a mix of expert-led webinars, in-person workshops, and policy simulation exercises, you'll gain real-world skills along with personalized mentorship. Through our policy programs, we connect good people to good ideas and good networks. Apply now at the link in the description to make an impact.
Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast by the Takshashila Institution. We are a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like bringing fresh perspectives to Indian affairs and Indian perspectives to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of All Things Policy. We have a very exciting episode lined up for you today. My name is Rohan. I'll be your host. I am the Assistant Program Manager of the Tech and Policy Specialization here at Takshashila Institution. And today I'm joined by my colleague Shobhankita. We will be talking about the recently concluded Paris AI Action Summit. Shobhankita, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, Rohan. Thanks for having me. I'm a research analyst at the High-Tech Geopolitics program at the Takshashila Institution. So at the outset, I want to start by just saying that these summits don't actually mean much. But it is an opportunity for countries to play their card, and it gives us an opportunity to read the political winds in a technology, which is to say that the final statement of the Paris AI Action Summit is not enforceable and it is not legally binding.
Right.
Regardless, I think there is value in understanding the positioning that different countries have used this platform for. Also, the summit in itself mostly covers civilian use cases and not military use cases, although some military talks and some roundtable around defense technology and implications of AI in defense was discussed. Much of the focus of this summit was largely civilian in nature. So with that sobering introduction, let me turn to you. Our viewers might not be aware of the previous two summits. So the Paris AI Action Summit is the third iteration of these summits. The previous two happened in UK and South Korea. But can you set some context about what was discussed here? What was the scope? What was the outcomes?
Right, of course. Thank you for that context setting. I think it is important to acknowledge that AI is a fairly recent phenomenon in our world, and working on legislating it and understanding the safety is something that is still ongoing. It's not going to be clear anytime soon. So this is very recent. It is only the third summit that has been discussed on a global stage. The first one happened on 1st and 2nd November 2023 in Bletchley Park, which, as we all know, is famous for being the area which solved the Enigma code during the World War II. And all of this started when the former Prime Minister of UK, Rishi Sunak, spoke at the Royal Society and gave a speech about how the changes brought about by AI could be very far-reaching because it could be as influential as, say, the Industrial Revolution or the arrival of the Internet. It is the newest frontier. And he believed that the extinction threat from AI should be treated with as much severity as the threat of, say, a pandemic or a nuclear war. And in such a influential and very important setting, there should be a global expert panel to address this issue because it is nothing that can be overlooked or not acknowledged. And he also stated that the UK itself was doing more than any other country in the arena of AI in the sense of keeping the civilians safe. And he announced that the UK government would establish the first AI Safety Institute in the UK, which is why he also decided and brought about and started the conversation about having an AI safety summit. And that is what led to the Bletchley Summit in Bletchley Park in 2nd November. And during the summit, only 28 countries attended, so it wasn't as global as, say, the United Nations General Assembly, but they did sign the Bletchley Declaration, which encouraged transparency and accountability from actors developing what is called frontier AI technology. And there was a focus on plans to measure, monitor, and mitigate the potentially harmful consequences of AI. Now, this was followed barely less than a year later by the AI Seoul Summit, which happened on 21st and 22nd May 2024 in the next year. Granted, this was what they called a mini summit. It wasn't as well attended as the first one in Bletchley Park. However, it did have a select group of AI industry representatives, and they talked about the safety measures they've taken as outlined in the Bletchley Declaration. So there was accountability involved based on the previous summit. And they also reinforced and re-emphasized the international commitment to safe AI development. And I think what separated this summit from the previous one was the added terms of innovation and inclusivity to the agenda rather than purely focusing only on the safety aspects. So during this summit, there were a lot of declarations signed. The first one was the Seoul Declaration, which aimed to enhance international cooperation on AI governance. And this, they said, could be done by engaging with a lot of global initiatives. And some of these include the Hiroshima AI Process Friends Group, the principles outlined in the OECD, and as well as the resolution passed by the UN General Assembly, which advocated for sustainable development of safe and secure AI. They also signed the Seoul Ministerial Statement, which emphasized a global strategy focused on innovation and inclusivity, as I already mentioned. And this can be done, they said, by highlighting the importance of AI-driven ecosystems, public sector applications, and sustainable practices, while also at the same time ensuring AI benefits, enhancing digital literacy, and bridging digital divides. Now, this was a mini summit, as I of course mentioned, but the one which happened most recently, barely 2 weeks ago, on 10th and 11th February, was the AI Action Summit. And this was held in Paris, France. It was held, I will just excuse my pronunciation, but I did practice it before the podcast. It was held in the Grand Palais des Champs-Élysées. I'm sorry if I've offended any French listeners, but this was the biggest summit by far out of the three summits because it had over 1,000 participants from more than 100 countries rather than the 29 governments in the first summit. And it also had some AI companies attending as well. So now I would like to turn the microphone over to my colleague Shobhankita because I want to know more about the Paris AI Action Summit. What was discussed this year? How does it compare with the previous two? Please share your thoughts.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you. I learned so much just from the setting of the context as to how these summits even came about, right? So, rightly pointed out by you, the Bletchley Summit was all about AI safety. And it actually turned off a lot of tech folks globally because it was almost nicknamed the AI Doomerism Summit because it was a bunch of non-tech people essentially talking about what a big wave that AI is going to be and how it's all negative consequences. So I think from the Bletchley to the Seoul to the Paris Summit, there's been a dilution of AI safety overall. So the first summit was called the AI Safety Summit. The second summit had safe, safety, and words like that in the final declaration, but it wasn't necessarily the title of the summit. But the third Paris AI Action Summit is actually the least focused for safety. It is action oriented, right? So once the main focus of the summit, AI safety, has now been relegated to a small subset of discussions within a broader trust in AI pillar, and which in itself was, say, just one of 5 separate summit tracks at the Paris AI Action Summit. So the current summit was all about increasing open access to AI, was about the impact of AI on jobs and the economy. It was about inclusivity, sustainability, and ensuring there is more diversity in AI. And it was about innovation and how we can accelerate innovation in the sector. So in that sense, I think some good has happened, which is that what happened with the extreme focus on AI safety in the previous summits was that it focused on the long-term consequences of AI. It was more abstract in its conversations and discussions. And I think it changed the focus of policymakers from what they could do here and now to regulate the technology, which is really the leverage that policymakers have today, to these abstract, long-term, almost doomerism kind of mindset, right? So bringing back global attention to the here and now implications, to the real impacts of AI for today's digital divides, for today's jobs and economy, and today's diversity and so on, I think is very real implications. And I would consider that alone to be a success for the summit in just the shift of tone and focus. You have to remember that EU actually prided itself on the first most comprehensive EU AI Act.
Right. Yeah.
And one consequence of this summit is that it looks like the EU is broadly going to slightly loosen some of the red tapeism around AI that they previously had.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, in the world of geopolitical tensions between US and China, the two most leading countries in the world of artificial intelligence today, the EU and specifically France has touted this summit to be the third way, which is that the EU is going to step up. They have announced, say, about $300 billion specifically for AI development in not just European government, but also European industry. And it looks like they're going to perhaps loosen down the regulations overall around red tapeism and push for a more multilateral effort in the development of AI. And to that regard, they have announced, for example, a discussion around platform approach to AI, which is that we're going to have joint development and joint access for AI for public good for developing countries as well as the EU. So in that sense, this is touted to be the third way for AI away from the pillars that US and China have built for themselves.
Yeah.
So I think some good has come out from the summit. The other thing is Paris is a city that's known for the Paris Climate Accord. So this summit actually also spoke about, for example, the infrastructure needs that AI demands and the energy consequences of that. And it pushed for sustainable use. And although climate change was not necessarily in the final statement, it does very clearly talk about the needs and energy demands of technology. And France actually used the opportunity to push for nuclear powered and electricity powered AI, which is, France has a lot of nuclear capabilities. So they use this opportunity to kind of push that as well. So I think just in its focus of open access, democratic, multilateral, as well as climate conscious AI, this summit in its move away from AI safety was a change in tone and pushing for innovation in the sector. So I would consider that in itself to be a success.
Yeah.
Having said that, the US and UK refused to sign this agreement, right? So how do we read this? I don't think a lot of people were expecting necessarily for Trump, just after his inauguration, to go into international treaties and sign any statement of any sort. But regardless, a lot of people have been considering this to be a disappointing outcome for the summit. How do we understand this? What were their reasons to decline to sign?
Yeah, so what Shobhankita is referring to here is the agreement that was signed at the end of the Paris AI Action Summit, which was called the Statement on Inclusive and Sustainable Artificial Intelligence for People and the Planet. So very interestingly, the US and the UK declined to sign the final statement. And I think the reason for the US not signing it is that JD Vance, who is the vice president of the US currently, he made it clear that the US was not going to reduce their research into AI. They're not going to reduce the development. They're not going to hold back because of all of this excessive focus on user safety. They want to innovate. They want to do it right now. And he also, in a surprising turn of events, whether it's a surprise to some people or everyone, but he said that other countries should be very cautious while cooperating with authoritarian regimes, which of course is a clear reference to Beijing and the People's Republic of China, because he said that, in his words, some of us in this room have learned from experience partnering with them means chaining your nation to an authoritarian master that seeks to infiltrate, dig in, and seize your information infrastructure. And of course, this is not surprising, and it's understandable because this summit took place just a few weeks after China launched DeepSeek, which was a new model that put a lot of other competing AI companies at risk, such as ChatGPT and OpenAI. So I think, in a nutshell, JD Vance's speech made it pretty clear that the US wants to maintain its position as the global leader in AI, and they don't want to really collaborate with other countries. So that is, I think, one of the reasons why the final statement wasn't signed. And of course, as you mentioned as well about France wanting to be more sustainable and wanting to tell other countries that AI is in good hands because France already has a lot of nuclear energy. So, in Emmanuel Macron's words, who is the president of France, in his words, he said, I have a good friend on the other side of the ocean saying, drill, baby, drill. Here, there is no need to drill, it's plug, baby, plug. Electricity is available. So, in this statement, he is referencing Donald Trump, who feels there is a dire need to focus on fossil fuels and digging for more energy because that is what will be needed to reduce inflation in the US. That is what Donald Trump has cited during his campaign speeches. And on the other hand, on the contrary, Macron believes that France already has a lot of nuclear energy, which is carbon free. So he says there is no need to drill because we have the sufficient amount of energy needed for the age of AI as such. So that is what the French view on this issue is. I would also like to move the focus away to China, unless you have more comments about the US and UK.
Yeah. So I think you're absolutely right. And J.D. Vance actually said this quite clearly. He said, the United States of America is the leader in AI, and our administration plans to keep it that way. Right? So, I mean, no surprises there. And on the part of UK, I think one is they didn't want to necessarily upset the Trump administration. So this was one way of pacifying the Trump administration by declining to sign the agreement that the US declined to sign. And the second was also that the UK actually seems to think that the focus on innovation and jobs and economy and the dilution of AI safety is counterproductive to the journey of AI overall. So the Bletchley Summit that happened in UK was all about AI safety, and that was just 2 years ago. So I think UK seems to think this is under-regulated, and the US seems to think this is over-regulated. Regardless, they refuse to sign. So with that, do we move to China?
Yeah, I think the UK does have a point because it is important for countries to look at AI in a holistic manner rather than, as you said, through a doomerist lens, because it is here to stay. It's not going anywhere, and we might as well look towards the positive benefits that it could potentially have on the world, because nothing is black or white. It's always a double-edged sword. I'm sure, like when the internet began, there were a lot of people who said we don't need this in the world. I mean, to shut it down and prevent it from reaching a scale where we cannot control it. I mean, they did have a point. We are at a stage where the internet has gotten a bit out of control, but I think it has also added so much to the world that would not be possible, and we should treat AI in the same capacity. And yes, as you mentioned, I think we should move on to China because this was another very important development from the Paris AI Action Summit. Because just as we discussed, the US, J.D. Vance talked about how China was an authoritarian regime which would not want to collaborate, they want to infiltrate. But surprisingly, China actually did sign the agreement. And a lot of people were surprised because the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson, Guo Jiaokun, stressed that we are against drawing lines along ideological difference, overstretching the concept of national security, or politicizing trade and tech issues. These are his words. And this surprised a lot of people. Do you have any theories for why they took this decision as opposed to just keeping their distance and doing whatever they wanted?
Yeah. So I think China plays a two-level game, right? One is domestically, and their rules for international politics is different, which is that internationally, they would advocate for open source. They would advocate for collaboration. But domestically, they would advocate for regulation and censorship and anything that benefits the state while not necessarily harming private institutions, right? So I think there is a hypocrisy that, and this has been well pointed out, that China has a two-level game when it comes to domestic and international politics. So they do want to benefit from an international cooperation sharing, because that is their way of ensuring that their industries and their companies are able to have the transfer of technology possible for China to become self-reliant, to become technologically supreme. And so internationally, they would advocate for open source, while, domestically, they would try and curtail freedom of speech as well as crack down on dissent and so on. So I think this is in line with Chinese policy. There was surprises, but regardless, I think this is very emblematic of Chinese behavior in other fields as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is a tactic which China often uses because there was a comment by a professor at a Chinese university named Shen Yi, and he told the Global Times that hegemony continues to be the primary barrier to the advancement of AI. And it is this hegemonic mentality that is currently causing disruptions and divisions in such collaborative efforts. That may be true, but as we have seen, China wants to pose itself as this very collaborative, very helpful and open player in the AI game. And of course, I do think there is a certain hypocrisy, but I don't think it is entirely accidental. It is very calculated and tactical. So I think moving on from China, I think another point about the Action Summit, which we haven't acknowledged yet, is the fact that it was not hosted by France entirely. It just took place within Paris, but it was actually co-chaired by India and France. This surprised me when I first read about it because India is usually not acknowledged on the global stage, and it is because it is part of the global south or for whatever reason. So I would want to ask you, what does this mean for India and the global south at large?
Yeah. So I think this is a good development, right? I mean, for India to lead the discussion for the transfer of AI, for open source, for AI technologies to be democratic, and for India to be the face of that is an important step for India. And not only did India co-chair the current summit, it has also offered to host the next summit.
Oh, I see.
So this is India really positioning itself as really that third way, right? I mean, this is not just the EU and Paris, but this is also India. So I look at that positively.
Yeah, and I do want to add that at this summit, Prime Minister Narendra Modi did talk about quality data sets that are free from biases. And he talked about how important they are in developing transparent AI systems. And I think this could be game changing because aside from India, the other countries are mostly from the global north with more homogeneous populations. And India, in this sense, can be a crucial player in the sense that they can develop AI systems that are local centric. They can address concerns related to cybersecurity, disinformation, and deepfakes that are positioned towards identifying a whole range of faces from all skin colors, from all races, from all nationalities, from all religions. Because sometimes AI data can be very skewed in favor of a specific kind of person that was in charge of developing the AI, because there is a kind of narrow lens through which they view it and through which they develop AI. So I think uh, making it more democratized and more inclusive, the AI systems, it could be more helpful in reducing AI bias. And this is also very important. It's not just a cosmetic issue, because sometimes these AI face scanners are used to catch criminals with face recognition technology. And in that sense, having more people contribute to AI data sets and training information is very crucial. He also talked about India's success in building digital public infrastructure, or DPI, because it provided a low cost open access network for governance. He also referenced India's DEPA, which is Data Empowerment and Protection Architecture. And as always, he talked about the National AI Mission, which fosters public private partnerships to make AI accessible and affordable for startups and researchers. So I think you are right. India is leading the way for the global south by being acknowledged as an important player in these discussions. And I think the path for India is only uphill from here on. And I can't wait to see what happens at the next summit, whether India hosts it, whether someone else does. Yeah, I think that's a great place to also conclude the podcast. Do you have any other thoughts about the Action Summit?
Yeah, just one last thing, right? Which is, I think, looking at AI as a public good, as an instrument, an enabler for the better lives and prosperity of people. I think the focus from AI as this big thing that is coming our way and we need to somehow, come together to tackle that, versus let's use this, let's see how we can benefit from this, let's see how we can ensure the transfer of this technology better to developing countries, the real impact for real aspirations and pains of people. I think just the focus of technology as an enabler versus an end in itself, which seems to be the position that US and China currently are, because in their entire geopolitical lens, I think they're forgetting that technology is an enabler to better lives for everybody. So I think just in that regard, the summit was helpful in just bringing better clarity to the global AI debate.
Yeah, enabler. I like that. I think that's a great thought to think about for the rest of your day. Thank you for joining us on today's episode of All Things Policy. I hope you enjoyed it. And thanks, Shobhankita, for joining me as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Rohan.
Yeah.
You all have a good day.
Stay tuned.
If you liked our show, dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs. Check us out at our Twitter handle @TakshashilaINST or our website takshashila.org.in.